What's up, friends? Welcome to another episode of the DATEABLE podcast, where we really dig into modern dating and help you all try to figure out why the shit is happening the way it is. And today, our episode is all about becoming more secure in dating, especially in early dating. I feel like I get really self-conscious and anxious in early dating, and it totally fucks with me.
Yes, you and all of our listeners. I think anxiety was the biggest challenge that I faced when dating, for sure. And I think this topic is going to resonate with so many people because, it's hard in today's world not to feel anxious while you're dating. And I have a lot of thoughts about attachment theory, like in general. Like it's been such a hot topic. I remember like one of my friends telling me how she stayed up till like 4 a.m. talking to another one of our friends about how fucked they were, that they were fearful avoidance and that they were screwed in the world of dating. So I think it's really great to like give a foundation of who you are, like give a foundation of how you operate and how you might be like predispositioned. But I also feel like sometimes people take it to be like there's something wrong with me. And I think that's where it's good to know to help you, but I don't want anyone to ever feel like there's something wrong with them.
Right. And like newsflash, there is something wrong with everyone. So
Yes.
you're not special if you think there's something wrong with you. But I think that everything when it comes to personal development and self-awareness is knowing where you are and then also knowing where you want to be. I think that just gives us a barometer of how to measure our progress. It's not so much like this is who you are, you're fucked, this is who you are forever. And I like the thinking that this is like, okay, my moment in time is here, but I can move it
Yes.
forward a little bit. I can progress every day towards being less anxious. And I think why I love this conversation because one, it's so relatable, but also Kirsty Taylor's who we are talking to. She is someone who's been through this and
Yes.
she overcame it, which is incredible. And you can hear her journey, but I think this is kind of like the magic of just sharing these stories because then we know how do we overcome the stupid anxious feeling you get in the beginning.
I know I'm feeling a lot less anxious because I just got back from a trip, and so did you.
Yes, yes. Mini vacays.
I feel like sometimes it's hard to take the time out, but it really does help in so many ways. So I went to Tahoe and I managed to find hot springs that were $15 to go to.
What, for the whole
And I
day?
went, yeah, or 2 hours, but I went multiple times because I love hot springs. And
Damn,
there
that's
is no
good.
better way to relax than a hot spring, in my opinion. And you just got back from Mexico, so you probably were in a lot more water than I was, even.
I love the fact, okay, I remember getting a text from Julie saying that she snuck into a hot tub at a hotel. I'm like, this girl just chases hot water wherever she goes. Wherever there's hotness, that's where she's going to be. I was chasing hotness in Cabo, Mexico. I've been to Cabo 2 other times. First time was for spring break, so I totally blacked out. I don't remember it at all. And so this time around, being in my 40s, being in a relationship, going to Cabo was a completely different experience. And one thing that I did that was completely different from my first time was I was completely dry. I didn't drink. I'll give you a good reason why. This might be TMI because I had a UTI. Okay, so I was on antibiotics and fucking A, people, like for anybody who's had UTIs, don't you think that is just like the worst punishment for pleasure? Like I'm afraid to have sex because I get fucking UTIs. It's so fucking annoying.
You
That's
get
what.
more UTIs than anyone I know.
Do I really? I get like
Yeah.
two. I get them twice a year. This is like my cadence. But every time I get it sometimes like it goes like two in a row. It's really
Mm.
annoying. And so your picture of being in a hot tub or a hot springs, I was like, hell no.
But what did you do in Mexico then? Were you not in the water?
Yeah, we swam,
Okay.
cold water. We went in the pool, went in the ocean. But I loved being dry in Mexico because I had a lot less chatter in my mind
Mm.
when the alcohol is not there. And, Julie and I have talked about this before. Like when we were dating, drinking was a big part of it because alleviates that
Yeah.
anxiety and nervousness. And I'm not saying this to say if you are drinking on dates, you're a bad person. I'm not trying to tell you that. I'm just telling you that if you try it sober and dry, it gives you a completely different experience. And I really enjoyed my sober time in Mexico.
Well, the irony about alcohol in general is a lot of times you turn to it to, alleviate anxiety, especially social anxiety when dating. I know I definitely drank too much on dates when I was kind of first going out there and doing the serial dating thing. And the irony, though, is that it is a substance that makes you more anxious and
It
more
does.
depressed, right?
Yes.
So it's a
Hmm.
depressant. So I think it's really interesting too. It's also, I kind of think about it with sex too. It's like it makes you looser and like more ready to
Hmm.
go. But then there's all these like issues that happen if you
Whiskey
drink too
dick. Yep.
much. Yeah, so that's interesting. I've also been kind of cutting back on the alcohol as well lately. So I
Mm.
think that it allows you to do a lot more. You don't have the hangovers, all that stuff.
Yeah, you have your mornings back, which is
Mm-hmm.
nice.
Exactly. Exactly. But while we're on the topic of anxiety, because that is the topic of this episode, we did something super fun today, a poll of our listeners. We always love polling our listeners. So
Hmm.
shout out to all the folks that follow us on Instagram and then also the folks in Love in the Time of Corona Facebook group. That's where these polls happen. So if you're not there yet, get on it. But I was curious because, I mean, a lot of people have read this book Attached. I feel like
Hmm.
that is like the Bible that people are always like, have you read this book Attached? It's like, yes, we have. But like I was mentioning, like I've had friends that like severely like think there's something wrong because they're a certain way. And I was curious what the breakout was. So overall, 50% of folks are secure. And again, this isn't
50.
like 100%, but this is what the stats of this book say that are published online. 20% are anxious,
Hmm.
25% avoidant, and then 5% is that fearful avoidant, which is basically you're anxious and avoidant at the same time.
Ah, this is so reflective of the different styles because if you're avoidant, you're probably avoiding the question. If you're secure, you're like, yes, I'm going to
Well,
answer this
that's the
question.
irony that I wanted to share is like that was not the breakout of our listeners at all. And I think there's a few theories of why. So our listeners were more 45% ish anxious.
45. Okay.
So the again 20% is what the stats are saying collectively. And again, there's a lot of, it's hard to know how 100% this is accurate, but um collectively the stats are saying 20%, but we're more in the 45% range. So on Instagram it was actually slightly lower than on Facebook.
Mm.
And then for our listeners that put in the poll, and then our secure attachment was about 38% on Instagram and then 12% on Facebook. People were identifying that way.
Mm.
And then avoidant, we were about 14% on Instagram, 8% on Facebook. Fearful avoidant was another 14% on Instagram, 6% on Facebook. So I think there's a few theories. One of our listeners in the sounding board, Megan, that we have known for years, she sent us a message that made me laugh. She was like, I think all of the avoidant people are avoiding answering this
There you
question
go.
right now.
Yeah, they're avoiding it. They're like, fuck no, I'm not going to answer this question.
But I also think like people that maybe seek out dating podcasts or want to learn more and educate themselves might skew more on the anxious side. I know
Hmm.
both of us have identified as being more anxious, especially when we started this podcast. I think the podcast has helped us become more secure. But I
Hmm.
think when we started, we were feeling anxious. Like, I think when you're like, why can't I figure this damn thing out with modern dating? A lot
Right.
of times you're more on the anxious side. And then there's also stats that the dating, like the online dating pool, is made up of more
I
anxious
believe
and
it.
avoidant people because, in theory, secure people are in relationships more. So that's
Mm.
kind of an interesting take on why our numbers might be slightly different. But we got a
Mm.
really good comment from Lauren that said, I feel like I've worked my way to secure, but anxious is the way I tend if the dynamic is unhealthy. And I'm so glad she said that, because that is exactly what we're talking about today. Of there's, again, nothing wrong with you if you're anxious. I think for me personally, like, I'll always have some anxious tendencies because that's how I'm wired. And some of it's finding a partner that accepts those anxious tendencies, or being in a dynamic that doesn't bring them out as much, or just owning the fact that, like, hey, if I don't hear back from you for 2 hours, I am going to feel anxious. Can you try not to do that? So I think that this episode really dives into, like, what do you do when you are feeling anxious, and how do you use that information to make, different decisions, and to not say, like, again, there's something wrong with me, but, like, how am I going to use this information as knowledge to become more secure?
Question for you and all of our listeners listening to this. What attachment style do you think Will Smith has? Curious. What do you think? Is it avoidant or violent? I don't know, one or the other.
There's a new one. We've created a new one, violent attachment style. I don't know. I don't think it's avoiding, because he probably just would have avoided the conflict, right?
Right. Is it anxious? Like, is he just anxious about the...
Maybe it's fearful avoidant.
Whoa, fearful avoidant.
I mean, secure, you probably would have sat down face to face, had a conversation.
Yeah, privately.
Yep.
Fearful avoidant. We got you, Will Smith. You're one
There
of the...
should be a new game that we
6%?
diagnose.
Like,
yeah, the 5%.
you're a rare breed, Will Smith, aren't you?
Oh, yes. Anyways, we are trying announcements. We are trying something new this week. So you might notice that our intro is slightly shorter, because we are going to be doing a second episode on Sunday, where we do the question that we get submitted that's typically in this intro, but we go a little deeper. It's like brunch talk. We're going to release them on Sundays so you can get the answer. I think one of the reasons why we did this is we heard some feedback that, like, these questions are really helpful, but sometimes they're hidden in the whole description of the episode. And we were like, well, we don't want to take away from the meat of the episode with our guests. So how can we do this as a complimentary part of the podcast? So we are trying something new. Feedback is welcome, but check in on Sunday for kind of this extra bonus that's going to be every week.
And even if this question doesn't apply to you, we still highly recommend that you listen to it, because you always learn from what other people are going through. You'll feel like you're not alone in the process. And also, you just hear personal anecdotes from both Julie and I. So even, again, if the question doesn't apply to you, still listen to it, because I think you'll still get something out of it.
Yeah, and I think another plug for the sounding board and all the programs that we do, we will be releasing Finding Your Person again in the near future. We're not sure on the date, but of course you can always join the wait list to be up to speed on any information at findingyourperson.com. But one of the things that's been so fascinating is when we do these live sessions, people sometimes won't ask any questions, but they'll come after and say, I got so much out of that, just hearing what other people were going through. And it made me feel like I got this, because it's not just me. There's nothing wrong with me. It's just this is part of the course.